Well, for some of you, I'm going to ask to go back a few years. For some of you, you're going to be living through this right now. How many of you remember those moments in grade school or in junior high school where somebody says, okay, we're going to pick teams. And here are our team captains. And 9 times out of the 10, they're the most athletic kids in this class. And inevitably, Billy and Tom or Susie and Gina pick the kids that are the best kickball players or the best dodgeball players or the best softball players or basketball players, whatever you're playing. And inevitably, there's that small, dwindling few who aren't very athletic or very competitive. And the message is, when there's down to 2 or 3 kids, well, all right, I'll take Timmy there, and you can have the other 2. None of you ever experienced this, right? Ever the last one picked? No show of hands. And the message is, you're on this team, but you're really a liability to us. We feel like we'd be almost better off without you, but we can't say that. Nobody feels good about being the last one chosen or included, but not really. Well, maybe in a different way. Some of you in the past, probably not recently, but specifically at New Year's or Christmas, we often have Christmas parties, or at work you have holiday parties, or somebody invites you to a school reunion or a family gathering, and sometimes it might seem a little shallow or vain, but have you ever asked, who's going to be there? Who else is invited? And behind that question might be, oh, I hope so-and-so is invited because I'm attracted to them, or I like them. Or behind that question might be, oh, geez, is the boss going to be there? My supervisor going to be? I don't want to be in the same room as that coworker or that classmate. I don't want to have it be awkward for everybody else, is what we say. But anybody ever kind of check out the guest list, the seating chart? Okay, who's at my table at this wedding? No, of course you haven't. I mean, hey, come on. You people are made of deeper substance than that. I have. Let me be honest. And it doesn't make you a horrible human being. It just makes you human. Behind those kind of sentiments as to who's on the team, who's included, who we feel comfortable being at the table with us at the reception, and who we'd rather say, okay, can you just switch their name to table 4? Is behind the scenes of what Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus. He doesn't come out and say it. But if you hear the words that Virginia just read, assuming that you all have heard that God gave me this special responsibility to bring the Gentiles in, you know, the Egyptians and the Romans and the Greeks, and include them into our Judaic communities. Okay, hey, yeah, the more the merrier. Great, bring them on in. Why didn't you just say so, Paul? Of course we've got room. Except when you read all the books of the New Testament, like Galatians, and they sent spies to oversee what Paul was doing. Are these new converts, these Gentiles, are they following kosher? Are they ascribing to the Torah? Have they been circumcised? Because, hey, if we got to do it, they got to do it. They got to be part of are they part of our identity, or are they just kind of half measures? And you see there's this tension between 2 different peoples. And Paul says, this is a new thing. I'm the first. These things that have historically, up to this moment, is mysterious secret that God has given me as a message to include and bring together 2 different peoples. Well, yes and no, Paul. I mean, didn't King Solomon pray for all the peoples of the earth? Didn't the prophet Isaiah say God is the God of the Babylonians and the Egyptians and the Jewish people and the Assyrians, and that we're all God's children? I mean, so come on, Paul, you're not the first one to ever say these things. But clearly, if you go through Scripture, while there have been many who talk about inclusivity and belonging to each other before God, there's a human pushback to say, yeah, I'll include the people who are like me, but not these folks. Not so much. And maybe the differences between Jew and Gentile, maybe that's a struggle for us. Maybe it's between black and white. Maybe it's between able-bodied and disabled, whatever that disability. Maybe it's been between paroled on felony charges and those who've never been in prison before. Yeah, they're welcome here, but keep an eye on the silverware with those ex-cons. That we have our limits, right? Perhaps maybe most encapsulated with this is there was 3 churches that were going to merge, pretty near to home here, actually. And the 3 churches were negotiating how they were going to become one body. And they said, well, this is going to be great. There's all these positives. I mean, all of us are running on shoestring budgets. We can pool our resources. We could do more in the community. We can be more visible. All of us have dwindling and aging memberships, so we can pull it together. We'll be a bigger, badder, better version of ourselves. Except the one church said, now, when these other 2 congregations come to our place, we're not going to give up our name, right? And we're going to use our pastor, and their pastors are, thank you very much, but, I mean, we don't have to change anything, right? They're just going to become a part of us. We don't have to do anything the other way, right? We don't have to do any reciprocation here. There's no common ground. We're the bigger of the 3, right? We have the most money of the 3, so our voice should count more in true Christian compassion and compatibility. It is difficult when we get down to the brass tacks of baptism. When we say we are a child of God, beloved of God, made in the image of God, all right, yes, check, check, check. I'm on board with all those things. Thanks be to God. Thank you. Give me some of that water. But when you say you also belong to everybody else who's made in this image, you are called to, with the grace God gives you here, be grace-filled to those around you. Everybody? Do they all count? There's a few, Lord, that I'd like to keep off the list if we can. Just a couple. I just have, let's see. Well, there's 2 pages. Well, hold on. All right. There's a few more I forgot about. Can we make some changes to this? Can we make some revisions so I don't have to love them all like you love me? No, it gets kind of complicated when we take seriously how Jesus moves into relationship with others. And time again, the disciples are like, do we have to sit down and eat with these folks, Jesus? Because honestly, I mean, I know we're fishermen and tax collectors, and gosh knows our reputations aren't necessarily great. But some of these folks, they're the last ones picked on the team. They'll bring us down as a team, at least in the public eye. No, the early disciples had just as much trouble with this as you and I. You say, I don't have any trouble. I don't have any enemies. I don't have anybody I really loathe. What about when somebody is, what about when people are peaceably demonstrating and others are beating them. Or somebody is using really ugly, discriminatory language in front of you. What does it mean to be baptized when I'm on my high school football team and the talk in the locker room and the egos are, we're going to treat the girls who are in our classmates as objects to be conquered, and we're going to go out and get hammered every weekend as part of who we are as a team. Now, do I fit in or do I stand out? And what's the cost of standing out? If I say that this life I've chose to enter into means I can't do everything you guys are asking me to do on this other team. I belong to both. My identity as a football player and as a Christian, but there are moments when they don't overlap. Nice and neat. In the movie Hacksaw Ridge, true story, James Garfield plays a Apostles of God, Church of God, Christian man who, during the Second World War, enlisted, had a horrible home life, a father who beat him and his mother, and who he fought back with. And I believe, I don't recall the certainty, but I believe he killed his biological father. And from that moment in time said, I'll never raise a weapon against another human being again. Because of my faith, I'm going to do my best to live at peace, even with my enemies, and that means I'm not going to kill anybody or hurt anybody physically with my fists again. But he enlists in the army to fight in the Second World War. And when he goes to his sergeant, he says, I'll do all the drills, I'll do the target practice, but I won't carry a weapon in the battle. And the sergeant says, what kind of coward are you? Your brothers at arms are depending upon you we are going to war. He says in response, and I will go on that battlefield with you as a medic. And I will risk my life no less than any of my brothers that are fighting alongside me. If that's cowardice, that's your definition of cowardice. But I will go in this battle. And if you know the story of Hacksaw Ridge, it was a meat grinder. Most of his company were killed. But this one individual, this Christian pacifist, in the theater of war in Japan and in the South Pacific, saved the lives of over 100 men that were wounded in battle, dragged them back, pulleyed them down the cliffs, and went out again as the bullets are flying. And one of the more controversial scenes of the film, and it was verified as a true part of the story, is that he also stopped for a wounded Japanese enemy soldier and performed medic duties to save his life. My point is that sometimes we have, not sometimes, in life we have different pockets of who we are. We have our social self with our friends. We have our school self or our work self. We have our family self. And we are really good at compartmentalizing that and say, okay, Sunday I am my religious self, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday I'm at work or I'm at school. Being baptized says all those identities come here. All of them. And this one identity in belonging to Jesus and a life following God influence all those other aspects of the life that we live. And they don't always align. I can say that I'm a proud patriot and American citizen, but there are times when sometimes the government in our country says things that cause me to say, this doesn't align with my faith. And so I struggle. How do I be patriotic but also be true to my faith? John Pavlovitz, as he's writing a book that I recommend calling, If God is love, don't be a jerk. He says that when the pandemic began, airlines stopped their flights, churches stopped their services, sports seasons were postponed and put in bubbles, and the entire NCAA March Madness was canceled and schools went remote. And many people, many of whom are the same who remember or taught the words of John the Baptist, if any of you have 2 coats, then share with the one who has none. He says, as I go into the grocery store, I'm stunned by 2 women, both from my church, and one has the toilet paper rolls stacked up into a pyramid in her cart. And the other woman is saying, can I please just split the cost of one package? With just me and my husband, we don't need but just a few rolls. And the other woman laughs and runs off with her cart. I guess those rules that we talk about in church, or that life that we talk about, didn't really translate into when the teepee's in short supply, grab all you can get, or the 2-ply. Yeah, did you hear the rhyme there? Anyway. How is it that as baptized people, we suddenly forget who we are when we walk out the doors, and sometimes come off as people that nobody wants to be a part of that team because of the way you're acting? God might be love, but you're coming off as a real jerk. Yeah, I felt that before. He says in the book a term that I really have latched onto. He says that in this time of pandemic, and let's be honest, it's been a tough 2 years. Yes? You tired? Struggling with, all right, where are we at now? Are we, what phase, what are the precautions now? It's tough to keep up, and it's scary sometimes. And he says, I tended, Pavlovitz speaking, to get in a state of spiritual claustrophobia. Spiritual claustrophobia. Where I felt things were closing in on me, and I didn't know. I was stuck. Spiritually stuck. What do I do in this moment? One part of me wants to withdraw and just pull back, take care of my own. And it's nervous to, where do I even start? Because it's not just a pandemic. It's fear or worry about where we are as a people, and divisions and finger pointing. And well, I'm going to be baptized in the faith, but if you vote this way, you're not part of my faith. Left or right. Just tearing each other apart. Yeah, I can relate to feeling a little bit of spiritual claustrophobia. So my brothers and sisters, if at the very bedrock of this sacrament of baptism is a God who says, I love you, but you're not the only one I love. I love every child of God made in my image. That's everybody. And I want you to do your humanly best to try to see them as I see them. And in those that you really struggle with, and here's maybe the toughest. When every instinct is to say, hey, forget you, buddy, or to turn your back, or to talk about them in all the ways you don't like them to somebody else so that you can draw them in and you got an ally against them. God says, lean further in love. Love them more. Pray for them more. And as I was talking to the confirmands this morning, a Christian man with a much stronger faith than I in Dietrich Bonhoeffer, was talking about his experience in the Nazi Germany prison camps. After his father and mother had been arrested, his brothers and sisters and his parents executed because of his faith and outspokenness against the Third Reich. In the shock at the guards and his fellow prisoners that he would pray for, the commandant and the prison guards who had beat and tortured them, even offering them communion, and he said, it's not that I think that what they're doing is okay. It's that I am trying to love them and walk beside them shoulder to shoulder and pray and plead to God on their behalf and be the loving agent of Christ in a moment where they are unable to. That I am vicariously living the kingdom of God in a way that they're blind to at this moment. But that's my mission in this moment. That takes guts. That takes perseverance. And let me tell you the tough thing here. When Paul said, hey, I'm bringing these two teams together, a lot of the people who had grown up with Paul said, no, you're not. Not while I'm here. We're walking. Who do you think you are? You're nothing like the guy we know. The old Saul would have never done this. Yeah, I know. But suddenly God's vision for God's people is a lot bigger now. And things that I couldn't see before, my biases or prejudices that I had, my own ugliness rearing up inside of me that couldn't see the beautiful things in some of God's other children, some of those scales have fallen off now. And I've got to try and live differently, even if it's not reciprocated. So, I guess I close by asking, if the God we serve from here and in this place is love, how do people see us? If this life has become my life, what do people see through me and through you? Amen.